Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, where you can awaken your mind to clarity and success even in today's life challenges. We're here to provide insights and solutions that will help you live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hello, everybody. This is Joanne Victoria with another amazing episode of the Sanity Project podcast. You are here to discover a life of clarity, confidence, and success. If you're an entrepreneur thinking about it, you're in the right place. Our guest today is Alejandro Esch. That's E-S-C-H. For the last 20 years, Alejandro has been focusing on areas such as performance improvement, coaching, team building, instructional systems design, and change management. He has worked in several industries and organizations across the world. In the United States, he has worked and lived in California, Michigan, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, and Texas. And he's also worked and lived in Argentina, Costa Rica, Venezuela, Holland, India, and England. And the rest he'll tell you when we bring him to the show. And welcome to the show, Alejandro Esch.
Well, thank you so much, Joanna. It's a pleasure being here, and I'm a big fan of your podcast.
Oh, thank you. That's good to hear. Well, I think the people who are listening could use your perspective and point of view with being proactive. I know that that's an important aspect of who I am, but I can always learn more, and that's what we're here to do. So tell us how you got to this place where you're traveling all over the world, dealing with people who need your support and help in proactive performance consulting, and you write books. Tell us about your book and tell us about your path.
Sure. So I'm not sure how far I should go back, but I think it's probably important to say that I grew up in two different cultures. I grew up in the United States and in Costa Rica. My mom and dad are divorced, and they were divorced since I was younger, since I was 3 or so. So I would go back and forth between those two countries, and I'd often stay for several months. My dad would make me stay and go to school during my 3-month vacation. And so I really didn't have a 3-month vacation when I was younger, because I was always either in school in the States or in school in Costa Rica. And that's the reason I'm bringing that up is because there was a lot of change going on since I was little. And I think change is really part of who I am. And that's probably one of the reasons I went into change management. But even before that, I went to undergrad in the States and graduate school in the States. And I was working with several different companies just as a instructional designer. And I realized that instructional design is basically the analysis, the development, the design, the implementation, and the evaluation of a training solution for an organization. And so I was doing that as a professional, and I ended up getting a master's degree in that field. But what I realized is that there was more to just training. You know, there's organizations and individuals all over the world. They really, even if they have the training that they're required to have for a change happening in their life, they sometimes fail at it. So I started expanding my knowledge around performance improvement and being proactive with how you want, the outcomes in your life to be more positive. And so that's the path that I started taking. And so I went into human performance improvement and change management, which is a more holistic view of how people could get the most out of life and the most out of their organization, their company, their school system, their family, whatever. So that's basically how my path and where I am right now.
So when you talk about change management being a holistic perspective, what do you mean by that for those who are listening who might not get it?
Well, ironically, you would think that organizations and individuals would adapt well to change, but we all struggle in our lives with different changes that we know are coming or that we don't know are coming. And so once you in my methodology, it's called Stop, Prepare, Act. And I use an analogy of a stoplight. So so there's the red light, there's the yellow light, there's the green light. So when you know a change is coming in your life, you should stop and really understand what that change is. So really get the information that you need to prepare for this change coming up. So, for example, using like a couple that just found out that they were pregnant. That's a change that they may have not been prepared for. So they really need to stop and create a sense of urgency around that change that's coming in 9 months and prepare for it. So first of all, create a sense of urgency around it. Hey, let's sit down and talk about what we need to do for this baby coming up in 9 months. Let's maybe send out an email to our family members so we could get some emotional support from them, or possibly financial support if you need it. Let's possibly start figuring out, what to expect as far as like, maybe we need to make a crib or have a baby room.
Sure.
Maybe we need all these things that you have to do for this change coming up. So you're stopping, creating urgency. You're preparing, which is the yellow light, and then you're acting, which is the green light, which is you actually start implementing those changes that you prepared for, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And when you talk about a sense of urgency, I see people acting more in panic than sense of urgency. In fact, I don't see a sense of urgency in most people when they're putting together a project or a business or whatever they're doing. It doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency in the real sense of those words. Hey, create a plan, let's move forward. They just panic. They wait and then they panic.
Yeah.
And you can't deal with panic. It's just because the brain is off the rails.
Yeah, they're more reacting than proacting.
Yes. So how do you get people to stop proacting or reacting, excuse me?
Yeah, so the way I teach it in my workshops is I teach my methodology, and you go through several different examples, and your own personal example too. So you might start thinking about what change is gonna happen to you in the next 5 weeks or 6 months, and then stop and really understand what that change is. Maybe it's not as crazy as you think it's going to be. Maybe it's really something less tragic than you think it is, but you won't know that unless you stop and start getting to know what that change is. So when is it going to happen? Where is it going to happen? Why is it going to happen? What are the benefits of preparing for that change? What are the consequences of not preparing for that change? And once you get to know what that change is and what that the details of that change, then you can start preparing for it. So you're going into the prepare phase, and so you start, possibly, like if you work for an organization, maybe you have to hire new resources, or maybe you need to buy new equipment, or maybe you need to buy new ventilators, for example, with this whole thing with COVID. Maybe you need to, I don't know, it could be a bunch of things depending on your organization.
Right.
But you're listing them and you're preparing for that. And then you go into acting on those elements and those tasks that you listed for preparing for it.
So when you're helping the organization, corporation / organization, whatever it is, create a plan in order to be prepared, do you ever find that people get stuck either in creating the plan or have the willingness or lack of willingness to create the plan, or stall the plan?
That's a great question. Yes. And that's why creating a sense of urgency in the stop phase is super important. And it has to come from leadership. It can't come from anybody outside of leadership, because it's not going to carry as much weight. And so it's important for organizations. When I'm working with CEOs or heads of departments, I have them create a sense of urgency and send out an email to everybody regarding the change coming up, then have several different meetings with, town hall meetings or all hand meetings, which some organizations call it all hands meetings, with the whole organization, talk to them about what the change is, when it's coming, why we need to prepare, what are the consequences of not preparing. And that usually gives a hook onto the rest of the organization and a motivation on to start preparing for this change. If you don't do that stop phase, it's really useless to go into the yellow phase where you're preparing and even the green phase, the acting, because you're not going to get enough rigor behind the need to prepare for the change or the change itself to motivate these individuals to actually help you out and actually, be behind you on making the change seamless as possible.
Right. Just as a sidebar to lead into my question, I usually look at every group I'm engaged with, whether I'm in front of the room or within the group, as my world for that moment, so that everybody in that room is has different aspects of anything. They all represent X, Y, Z, A, B, C. It doesn't matter, but all of the things are in one space. So I would presume that when you're dealing with organizations and you send out this email and you have these all hands meetings, whether they're online or whatever, because you reach somebody resists. Now, there has to be one, because that would be, if there wasn't, there wouldn't be complete representation of the human being. So How do you handle resistance when you're trying to increase performance?
So what I encourage also throughout this whole process is sending out, pulse checks to the organization to see how well they feel they're prepared for this change. And why not. So it's a list of questions, and there you could extrapolate the different reasons why they're resisting. And so once you find out that maybe there's a trend of a certain reason why people are resisting, then you could identify how to fix that particular worry that folks have, and then once again communicate the solution to that. And even communicate how you found it, and why you're addressing it. And then once again, send out a survey again, or ask, or you could just even do individual interviews.
Sure.
And try to overcome that hump with whatever the issue is. There's always a solution for everything. There's of course there's always the people that are going to constantly be against change no matter what.
Correct. Right.
And those folks are usually don't tend to be, if you do the methodology correctly, they're really the minority, and sometimes you just have to let it go, let them be them, and worry about the folks that are on the fence, and those are the ones that are willing to listen and willing to negotiate and willing to come up with different solutions that will meet their needs.
Yeah, it's always a test for the consultant to deal with those people that are trying to cross the fence to the right side, to the side that works, because you have to come up with language and possibilities and opportunities for them that they can buy into.
Absolutely.
And go ahead.
No, and it's communication at the end of the day.
Yep.
And that's why it's so important to consistently communicate throughout this whole process until the change seems like it's an everyday part of your life, and hopefully it seems seamless enough that you didn't have too much pain adapting to it.
Well, if they create a new space in their brain, a new pathway in their mind waves, and repeat it often enough, it usually becomes a new part of their life. So what do you say? I mean, you're talking about your new book, Bright Light, Dark Pandemic, How COVID-19 Illuminated the Need for Change Management. Can you give us a few minutes of that sure. Before people buy the book themselves? And you say use the first 4 months of COVID pandemic as the backdrop for applying these principles. I mean, I was watching last night. I was watching a television show that I record because it's got a good actor I like, Freddie Highmore, I think that's his name, and it's something about the doctors, whatever. He's a doctor, and people are incorporating the pandemic into their new TV shows, which I don't know. It's kind of like, wait, it's 8 months already. I don't want to see it from the beginning again. It's like, oh no, oh God, I want to go to bed now. And what they went through, they're still going through because it's two-parter, but they went through all of this denial themselves. The medical community was denying that it was anything but a flu, go home, rest. And then when things came to the front, where they had to take action, they didn't know what to do. And I think this was just this particular show was just indicative of probably what went on out in the real world, because if there is a real world out there, they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
You're also dealing with people who don't know what to do. Obviously, if they knew what to do, they wouldn't need to hire you. Mm-hmm. So how can you relate how to use these steps as you used them in your book, because I haven't read the book. So just give us some insight to that so that people have some foundation. I'm always harping on foundation. Yes, communication is vital, clarity is vital, but foundation, without a foundation. And there was no foundation when COVID started.
Right.
At least from my position living in the United States, in the state of Washington, in the United States. So, who knew? Somebody said, oh, we have this, and we go, oh, okay, and then we trip along. So tell us a little bit more about what's in your book about that.
Yeah, sure. I started writing this book back in late March, early April, and what I noticed was that here in Costa Rica, the way that we were proactively acting even before the COVID-19 hit Costa Rica was, I thought was normal, but then I realized that it was fairly unique. Not, and then several other countries were doing the same, but a lot of countries, especially the big power countries, weren't doing the same, and it was just amazing to me. I'm like, wait, how they have so many more resources, so many more experts, so many more hospitals, so much more infrastructure, and they're not, and they're failing at this change that's happening to them. So that's when I started writing about it, and it wasn't really going to be a change management book. I was just jotting down thoughts and notes, and so some of the book is my personal thoughts and experiences throughout the pandemic, which we all have, and it was a big scare for all of us. And so there's some of that in there. But then I also started writing about how the Costa Rican government prepared for the change, and then also acted on what they prepared for, and it ended up being successful. By the time May came around, we only had six cases. And I think one death or something like that was really, really low. It's changed since then, but that's because of some other government issues that happened with taxes and things like that people started protesting. But the first
those darn people, they always get in the way.
Yeah, there's always something, right? 2020. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
And so anyway, so I started writing about it, about how we did well, and then I started to implement my change management methodology within that context of the pandemic, the first 4 months for us here in Costa Rica, but also in other countries like Italy and Spain and the United States and New Zealand and Taiwan, and so I started kind of doing a comparison between these countries and what they did well and what they didn't do well, and sure enough, it's creating a sense of urgency. It's preparing and it's implementing what your plan was to prepare for this change. And so that's basically how I started writing this book and what the book is about. So some of I call them performance improvement interventions in the book. Some of those that the Costa Rica government did, for example, was secure the airports before COVID came to the United States. We were testing people's, we were taking people's temperatures and making sure people weren't coughing, and we weren't using masks at the time, but we were doing at least some kind of checkpoints on the physical beings of the passengers jumping on the planes, and we also we listen to our experts. So we have a doctor here, which is kind of an equivalent to, I guess, Anthony Fauci in the States, that we all listen to, and he created a sense of urgency in all of us. I remember watching the TV once COVID did hit Costa Rica. Everybody was super scared because it's a small little country and we don't have a lot of infrastructure. And so we were, everybody was kind of scared that it would wipe us out. And he came in and he created a sense of urgency. He didn't create panic. He didn't ignore it. He didn't downplay it. He said, we have enough supplies. We have enough. Our healthcare system has enough resources. So he assured us with all these facts and all these preparations that they had been doing for weeks before they even got the virus, and so that created a bit of fear in all of us, because it was real. It was in our country now, but it also gave us a lot of reassurance, and it also gave us a sense of calmness, because we felt somebody was actually handling the pandemic, somebody serious that was actually taking control and giving us the facts on what was going on, and how well prepared we were. So Costa Rica, I wrote down 10 performance improvement interventions that the Costa Rica government did. And like I said, securing the airports, listening to your experts is number 2. Controlling crowds is number 3. And also implementing driving restrictions, which I think that was one of the big reasons why the coronavirus didn't spread so much here in Costa Rica. Is the government created a system on which, depending on your last digit of your license plate, which cars could circulate when. So that created everybody wasn't spreading around across the country, and that, I think, isolated the virus quite a bit here in this country. And so there's 10 of them. So if you guys are interested, you can pick up the book and learn more about how this government did that. It also talks about New Zealand and Taiwan and some other countries.
New Zealand they're a very small country, so they don't have that many people, so it's easier. But what I read about New Zealand is that the Prime Minister, whatever she is, Jacinda, she got on the bandwagon right away with not letting people in New Zealand, especially if they came from certain parts of Australia, New South Wales, whatever it might be. They had these driving restrictions put in place immediately. But again, we're dealing with these human beings who don't like to be told what to do. And everybody is going to do what they want to do regardless of the consequences. And that's, I think, the biggest problem with this pandemic is more people, don't have any more groups over 100. And they just do what they want to do, whoever these people are. And I'm not blaming them or whatever, but if they got sick, there are results to consequences. This is a consequence of gathering where you shouldn't be gathering, or gathering with people that you shouldn't be gathering with, or be at church or social. And I think these are the people these aren't people on the fence.
Right. No, and I think that amount of people has increased since the pandemic has shown up,
Yes.
And so it's kind of sad, because I don't think there would have been that many now if leaders created a sense of urgency from the beginning and didn't minimize the pandemic, and instead of and got in front of the pandemic like some other countries. I think those numbers would have gone way down. But since that didn't happen, then it just opens up, I guess, it gives them the green light to behave that way.
Waiting for what part of it is, huge part is they don't have a job. A lot of these people who are agitating themselves and everyone else lost their not all of them had jobs to begin with, but the majority of them did. They had jobs, so they had no sense of purpose. And when something good comes along, let's fight this because, everybody enjoys being, an outlier from time to time. But the fact that they didn't have jobs, I think, was a huge issue. And that was exacerbated as time went by. It just got bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, here in Costa Rica, what happened is that I was mentioning this earlier. The government, the president and some other government officials wanted to increase the taxes in the middle of the pandemic when we did all this sacrifice of not going, following these protocols and so a lot of people didn't have a job and then they want to increase taxes, and that's why they came out and protested. It's still somewhat going on, and that increased a bunch of COVID cases and deaths, and but it all makes sense. It was just a bad decision on the government to increase taxes in the middle.
That's to say the least. I mean, that's what politicians all over the world do. That let's raise taxes. Let's add more fuel to the fire.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, they don't think they don't have anybody on their staff that thinks clearly about what would happen and how to herd their people. Anyway, So Alejandro, how can people find you and your book?
Yeah, you could pick up the book on Amazon or on Barnes & Noble. It's called Bright Light, Dark Pandemic. Or you could Google it too and find it that way. And my website is called Proactive Performance Consulting, www.proactiveperformanceconsulting.com. And I'm also on Facebook with that same name.
And also on LinkedIn with that same name.
Also on LinkedIn with that same name. That's right. And on Twitter.
Right. Well, we just got it, and access to Alejandro will be on my website when this is posted. So people, if you're reading this on your phone, listening to this on your telephone, listeners, you can find all of that information on the page that he has, and it's probably all over the world by the time you're listening to this. Well, I want to thank Alejandro Esch for being here today, because this has been very illuminating. Bright light, dark pandemic, how COVID-19 illuminated the need for change management. So those who buy the book will have a 2-for-1, how to live in COVID-19 pandemic, because it's going to continue, people, just in case you didn't know that. And also you can use the Alejandro's points in your own life, in your own business, or if you're a consultant or a coach, mazel tov, use them out there. Thank you for being here today. It's been splendid. I've enjoyed talking to you, and your content is bottom line, clear, and enjoyable. So everybody have a great day and talk soon. Oh, forgot to tell you to go to my website. Ask for the order, Joanne. Call to action. Go to my website, askjoannevictoria.com, and book yourself for a free call to see if you want to work with me. Ciao, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joanne. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to askjoannevictoria.com to listen to more podcasts. Check out Joanne's coaching programs and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Life-Work Harmony. That's askjoannevictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.